Your friends, your friends. Radio friends again. Radio friends again. We've got a lot to share.
All right. All right. Oh, hopefully I'm not frozen. It's a little bit warmer outside. Steve Parker here in Berlin, Connecticut, back with another edition of Radio Friends again for the 28th of February of 2025. And already got a bunch of guys in here saying, okay, we'll try it another time. We'll give the guy another shot. So good morning to you, everybody. Let's say good morning. We got a smaller group here so we can go around the room. Pete, good morning.
Well, good morning from Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Steve. And there used to be this guy back in the 1940s on WOR, Uncle somebody or other. I forget what his name was. And he used to start by singing a song, "Hello, little friends, hello." And he would be so wonderful. And then one time they didn't turn his mic off at the end. And he said, "Well, that'll serve the little bastards for the night."
Wasn't that Uncle Don?
Uncle Don, that's it. Thank you, Ed. You knew
Was
it.
that his last show?
Yeah, yes, it was.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that that's one of those things where you always remember, or you change it throughout the years. But the funny thing is, Pete, you'll remember that forever, but you probably can't remember pretty much anything that
I
happened last
have
week.
no idea what I had for breakfast. No idea.
I have Bob Craig from Philly. How's it going, Bob, weather-wise?
Yeah, weather-wise, as Frank would sing, weather-wise, it's such a lovely day. Yeah, it's a nice day. It's very windy here, and we have cleaning the street, 41 big D degrees.
All right, Greg Simonson's here from Massachusetts. Hi, Greg.
Hey there, I'm in Northampton, Massachusetts. Some people call it the paradise of America.
I remember that as the home of the Loud Music Festival back in the 1990s when 104 went alternative. Guy calls up. He was doing the Loud Music Festival, Northampton, Massachusetts. Oh my gosh, he was doing like 50 bands in 5 clubs over 3 days. It was insane.
If it's too loud, you're too old.
Right. It was all alternative, and it was great. It was back to the old days of rock and roll promotion. I met the guy in Northampton at the bowling alley. He brought a handful of 20s with him, and then he gave me some CDs to make the spot out of. He said, "Oh yeah, don't forget to say Finlandia Vodka. That's my sponsor." So that was like, and I never saw the guy again. But cash.
Well, this happens to be a great music town. I've been part of the community here since about the 1970s. And it was really an innovative town for music.
Yeah, and radio up there too, right?
You know, we have Rachel Maddow got her start here.
Mm-hmm.
At a station in Amherst / Northampton, and then she wound up at the Northampton station.
Yeah,
But
she was an intern.
there's still
for a
an
friend of mine.
AAA station, WRSI, that at least is kind of listenable.
Is she
She was
from
the director
Northampton?
of Dave Brunel.
Is she from Northampton originally, or she just go to school?
Rachel?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, she grew up, I believe, in California, but she's like a Rhodes Scholar. She didn't bother with UMass or anything. And then she won a talent contest, be the sidekick of a guy who was on one of the stations here. She won that.
Yeah,
She's
she was the
also,
sidekick she was the sidekick to Dave Brunel, who does advertising stuff.
Yes.
She also plays for the other team, Greg, and we know
that
it's
too.
Northampton, and the team is all over Northampton.
Yeah, she lives up. I'm trying to think of which hill town she lives up. Hey Perry, where did Paul live up in the hill towns? Yeah, where did Paul live up in the hill towns? She lives up in Cummington with her
Yes.
wife,
Yes, she
girlfriend
does.
or whatever.
Yeah,
But
Tracy.
she was a sidekick to Dave Brunel, who I went to high school with. who
I
was
really?
in
I thought
advertising.
you were on the. I thought you were on the other team too, Tracy.
Okay, Tracy
All right.
Carmen. Long as we're talking about the other team,
And I don't mean gay.
Oh, you mean the Bruins?
Yeah, them.
I'm on Team Mickey today. I'm on.
Yay.
All right.
Yay.
There you
There's a
go.
mouse
Team
in the
Mickey.
house.
From beautiful Long Meadow, it's nice as can be outside. The sun is shining. I'm about 20 miles south of Greg, And it's going to be a beautiful day here. Get rid of all the ice on the driveway, whatever little is left. It's a good thing.
Yeah, so we can freeze up and we can break our asses in a couple of days.
That's
again.
tomorrow.
I didn't know you
Tomorrow's
were
supposed
so
to be
close.
50.
We got to get together at the White Hut one of these days.
Let me know. I'm here. My kids are up. Well, Perry's up at UMass. I'm right down the road from you. Let me know. We'll do it.
Okay.
Perfect. We got a lot of lunch gatherings here, North
Or
and
Nick's
South.
Nest.
Ed Bruder, good morning, Brett.
Good morning up in Manchester, New Hampshire. Like Bob Craig said, a windy but sunny day today. And we'd all like to congratulate Tracy on getting the product sponsorship deal with Arizona Tea.
Product placement, babe. Probably product placement. Ron Pell from the Shire. Hi.
Yeah, I'm back from 5 days in Florida. Had a wonderful time visiting my brother. It was 80 degrees for you Florida. Well, you Florida guys know it was 80 degrees yesterday and beautiful in Boca Raton. And I came back, real quick story, came back last night, late flight in, got in about 11 o'clock, got an Uber. Guy was from Turkey. And for a half an hour, we told him about how many times he's been crashed into with his Uber. And because he can barely speak English, the police didn't believe him and they would never do anything. And he complained, the police never do anything. Police never do anything. I said, what do you want from me, man? Just get me home. Sorry, I'll
Don't
tip you.
crash
Just
the
get me
car.
home.
Oh, God. Oh, Russ Oasis.
I'm coming to you live from sunny Miami. It's about 72 degrees out right now, and fair warning for you guys, I'm stealing all your jokes for my comedy routine.
All right. And that's right. You're still doing that stand-up thing.
I
huh?
do stand up. I got a show tomorrow night in Jupiter.
Yeah, and you're opening for somebody, or
I'm
is it
opening
yours?
for Greg Hahn.
All right.
For Greg Hahn?
Greg Hahn, you know him?
No, not at all. I do.
He's the opener. He opens for Louis C.K.
Oh, love Louis. Oh my
We
God.
know what happened to him.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a whole nother show.
Right.
All right. Oh yeah. So in fact, a guy named Gary Hahn runs the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York. And if you ever want to see it's the Nirvana of comedy. And they won't call it a museum because they would never put a name like museum next to comedy. And it's also the home of Lucille Ball. And she had a museum there for Lucy, but she didn't want to Jamestown to just be known for that. So they opened up the American Comedy Center. And they've got all of George Carlin's works. They've got Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner's chairs up there with the TV setup that they had. And a lot of great stuff. John Landry. Good morning, John.
Good morning. How are you? How is everybody? It's a beautiful
John,
day in
thanks.
Middletown. It's about 42 degrees, nice and blue sky outside. Waiting for it to warm up tomorrow.
Steve, I don't know if maybe he's in a different place, but did you skip over Ted?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That was intentional.
Thank you very much,
Oh,
Ed.
okay.
That-
Sorry.
That
Sorry.
was intentional because of today's topic.
Okay.
But thank you, because I have a tendency, I space over Angela sometimes and she's sitting next to me. We got here, let's see.
Bart Mazzarella.
There it is, Bart. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Hey, Steve, I don't mean to brag, but I'm coming to you live from Paradise.
Paradise.
Vero Beach actually is where the tropics begin. So we have tropical plants and, of course, tropical temperatures. Yesterday, I think we had 80 degrees. Today, I think maybe sunny and 74, 76, something like that. So it's a little bit like springtime, but it's a beautiful time of year over here. And I'm loving it, man. I'm here 38 years this year.
Well, congratulations. And now I saw a great shot on Facebook. Is it anniversary time for you and Kaz again, or?
No.
What do you mean by doing Kaz again?
That hasn't happened in a while. Anyway,
Thanks, Dave.
so this
of it
picture
here.
popped up, and it was Kaz and I at our honeymoon in the Poconos back in 1968.
Wow.
And I said, well, I'll just repost it. It's kind of fun, you know. But I said it's not my anniversary, but this, I wanted to just show this, and it's a fun
Your
picture.
love towards Kaz.
It's a
Yeah.
great.
So you
great
love
shot.
great.
Give her our best.
Heart-shaped pool or what?
Yeah.
No, ours didn't have a heart-shaped pool,
Okay.
but it was a place called Strickland's in the
Ah,
Poconos.
Jews. Okay, Jews.
Yes.
Greco, is that Slackers?
Jews for Jesus. Jews for Jesus.
I thought it was Slackers.
I want to.
No. When I was on the air, it was Jesus.
That's right.
Tom Borhall. Good morning, Tom.
Jay, you can call me Tom Morgan too. Thank you very much.
We'll put it up on your little name thing, and they will.
I don't know how to change that, but I'll work. I'll work on that.
I'll help you.
Good morning. I'm in Middlebury, Connecticut, which is one of the towns in Connecticut that uses middle as part of their name. We have Middlebury, Middletown,
Middlefield.
Middlefield. Yeah.
Middlefield. Yeah, and we have lots of middles.
A middle finger.
Yeah. But
part of the Finger Lakes.
I've been working on going through. You don't need my weather forecast. I've been working on going through all of these old things.
Oh,
wow!
And
those air checks?
And I found some stuff from Pete Salant, which I'm going to make available when he was Peter Mitchell. I'm going to make available to the group.
Oh God!
He may blackmail you. He may pay you not to post that stuff.
I'll send it to
I know.
Pete first. And I also want to hold this one up. I have no idea how this arrived. And can you guys focus on this?
And then that's
Ted
just a little
Delacour.
too small.
What's it say?
Ted Delacour.
Ted Delacour.
Really?
I've heard of him.
This is probably 30 years old. I'm
wow.
A little longer than that.
You were doing a
older
late
than that.
night show with a really deep voice.
Oh,
Very sexy and
What
What
station
year
was that?
Ted?
Mixed, that was a Mix 93.7. I did Connecticut After Dark, and I figured I was
that's
I had
what it
such an
was.
attitude on that station at the time that I was doing my Venus flytrap imitation from KRP. I said,
Hey,
Tom-
Ted,
Yeah.
did you know that 93.7 was WDRC's first frequency for FM?
No, I
They
didn't
used
know
to
that.
be, they used to be WLAE, the foreground music station. Then it changed to a Spanish station, and then it changed to urban. And
Well, you forgot all
rest
weather,
is-
all weather for
All
a whole
weather,
year.
yeah, for like
oh,
a
what's
year.
it? Yeah, well,
It was kind of a full circle going back to
Yeah.
93.7.
Yeah,
So
so-
interesting.
And we got Jim Harrington.
What's on here,
Oh,
Ted?
go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Doc Tom. Go ahead. You want to mention
Just to
something?
finish up, Ted, if you're interested on what's on here, I'll telescope it down and send you some of what you were doing back then.
Well, I appreciate that because I certainly didn't keep any air checks from that show.
It's pretty cool to hear it, you know?
Yeah.
All right, Jim Harrington. Morning, Jim.
Hi, guys. I'm in suburban Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it's sunny and probably around 40 degrees. And I'll be opening for Rigor Mortis and the Standstills tonight. Other than that, things are all quiet on the Pennsylvania front.
Now, what is the official name of your podcast? That
It's
came
called
up
It's Another Day. Jim and Bill, It's Another Day.
Okay,
And,
it's Jim and Bill. It's
Jim and
another
Bill,
day.
It's Another Day. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I
And
have
They have coffee too.
Yeah, we have right side coffee. I'm just
And
saying.
there's some more product placement. All right.
Yep.
There you go.
And
Judge Harrigan's here. Hi, Judge.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, buddy.
What happened to your computer, Hal?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. We
it
even
sounds
see it.
marvelous.
I was hoping to be coming you from the spaceship Discovery this morning, but I had some technical problem.
Couldn't discover it.
Did you have your Florida lunch yet, Judge?
What's that?
That's March
Did you have your
20th.
Florida lunch yet?
March 20th.
March 20th.
But,
Is that
yeah,
when the
I-
six women go up? Is that the one where the six ladies go up into space? Is that the one with the
Yeah,
this is
Jeff
what I was
Bezos?
hoping for this morning.
Three of them, I think. Three?
Yeah, Gail.
Gail
King.
King.
Gail King is one of the three women who are going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a one-way trip or is it?
Well, they've
Jim.
said she's been a
That's
space
not
shot
true.
for a long time. All right. Dave Nagel. Hi, Dave.
Morning. Coming from scenic Plainville, Connecticut. 42, sunny, beautiful morning. I was already outside with the dogs and just a gorgeous day. So,
Dave Overson, still down in Florida?
Let me check. Yeah, it is. It's a cool 67 degrees here in Port St. Lucie, and I've got my ESPN warm jacket on the side here, and it's sad. It's a sad thing.
It works better if you put it on, Dave.
Oh, you got to put it on. Oh,
it just has to be near you.
What's
All
that?
right. Dick called. Hi, Dick. Welcome back.
Oh, okay. I thought I'd be better if I turned my microphone on, I suppose. Good morning to everybody. Unfortunately, I have to leave, but I wanted to jump in and say hello from sunny, bright, warm Westport under the geodesic dome. You know, that's what the taxis are for, to always stay warm, except when it rains and you see the drops coming down and sticking over the side of the dome and everything. I know this is silly. I've done it too many times before. Everybody looks great. It's great to hear everybody's voice. Ronnie, I haven't talked to you, and I got to give you a call, Ron.
Yeah, we need to catch up, Dick. Yeah, it's been a while. You know, it's funny. One week you're on, the next week Barry's on. It's funny how you guys planned that or what?
Well, you know, when rumor comes out that Barry's on, I certainly don't want to upstage him. So I
You've never seen them together.
Bada bing.
But it's great to get together with everybody. I have to tell you, and you know, with my very first on-air name, and again, remember, I never got out of AAA. I just wasn't. I wasn't a major market air personality, but my first name was Rocky Stone. I think I told you that, and nobody could figure out what that meant when I would ask them. Oh well, that
Rocky Stone.
That's it. I was doing top 40, baby, and I could do that. I could dig down deep just like everybody else. You know what I mean, babe?
Yeah, imagine if you'd been on Popular 99 that way.
Well, actually, the only thing I did on Popular 99 was sports while we were setting up to switch over to WPLR, and then we kept doing sports. And they said, "Well, keep doing it." And I said, "I'm working. I got all day. But I did it anyway." That was the last time I was on the air, about 1972, maybe something like that. But the station still lives. It's doing okay, I guess.
Oh,
Hey, Dick, you got to get us some of those. You know, maybe we can talk off air or something. Just see if you can get us a few of the guys from PLR. I'd love to be able to, you know, talk about, you know, the history of that place.
How about Bud Stone? You guys remember Bud Stone from PLR, right?
Well, his name is Al Santos.
Right.
Yes.
Didn't he work with you, Russ, at NHC?
Yeah, I worked with him at NHC, and then when he went to PLR, he was doing nights, and some days I was doing drive at NHC. So I'd go over to PLR at night and sit with him in the studio while I did his show. He's a great guy.
Well, then I had to have met you back then, because I saw him all the time when we brought him over. I met him at WAVZ. He was working with the Judge. Judge was what were you doing, Judge? You were doing middays, or and he was doing
Wade. I started doing middays at Wade.
Yeah, because Bill Beamish was doing mornings, and I think it was you. And then I'm trying to remember who was in the afternoon.
Tracy.
Tracy Garno, and Jay Crawford was there for a while, and yeah, it was a fun crew. And then he went over to WNHC, and then we brought him over, and our salesperson Joe DeMeo, who couldn't sell himself out of a paper bag, but was one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. He became Stone Man, and the story about how he became Stone Man is just a story in itself. It's the stuff of movies.
Now, you said Bill Beamish. Didn't he end up being a record rep?
Yes, he sure did.
Yes, he did toward the end. Yeah.
He and Tracy.
Tracy too.
He and his little vial of white stuff used to come over to us every week. Yeah.
Doc Beamish.
Yeah.
It wasn't Tracy. Tracy was with Arista, right?
Tracy
Tracy,
came too. Yes, and he came too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He also had a number of different labels, I think. You know, you mentioned Bill Beamish, and I was thinking about the WMCA profile that was sent around with Ruth Myers. And did any of you see it?
Oh, yeah.
It was
great.
It's just sensational. And it really brought to mind the fact of those fun days when record guys used to come up to the station and the DJs would have record meetings. And there was a focus of that in the WMCA profile. And we never had those at DRC. It was mostly Charlie and Jimmy that would get together on Fridays, and they would put new music in. But I remember distinctly one day, if you remember the big D out of the studio, diagonally across was Jimmy's office. And I remember walking in there one day, and Bill Beamish was there, and he had an acetate of the America's Horse with No Name. And I said, man, what? I've never heard anything like, what a great record. And thankfully they put it in, I think, that Friday. But those were really fun times. So most of the DJ station, major markets would have those meetings with a music director, and they would go over and play a number of songs, which they were doing with Up, Up and Away in the MCA profile that was done.
I love that with them all singing along
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, it was really
that was
fun.
great.
You know, at MGK in Philly, we had, you know, call out research and all that stuff, which was all right as a guide. But I used to gather about 5 or 6 office people into my office, and we would have exactly that. I would sit them down, and they were in the right demo for what we wanted. And I'd play, you know, a good chunk of a song that I thought would fit the format. And it was amazing the kind of response that you would get. And I would say more than half the time, they were really right on in picking something that would become a hit.
If I had wanted to have one of those meetings at WYNY at 30 Rock, I would have had to have an engineer come and put the record on. So
exactly.
Seriously.
Even in your office, Pete? I mean,
yes, we had to had a tape deck in there too, but it had to be disconnected so it couldn't record. It could only play.
I know at TIC when Jay Clark was there, he and I and Tom Tyler would have music meetings, and we didn't meet the promoters, but they would come in with a bunch of new songs, and Jay would play them for us in his office, and Tom and I would look for the hook and look for whatever might work well and what sounded good, and that was pretty fruitful because the music was changing at TIC AM at the time. The whole performance format was changing. It's pretty.
That was quite an ordeal that Jimmy and your dad went through, Steve, on Friday. It was they were sweating bullets there. So we picked this one. No, whether they would get into a fight.
The elastic fights. That's what it was Friday, the elastic fights. We would have
the big
shooting
elastics. Yeah, Jimmy would keep a record playing all week long. If he's, you know, just trying to get used to it to see if there was something there. You'd hear it coming out of his office a lot.
Right.
Charlie used to be influenced by Philly. There were a lot of Philly hits in Hartford.
Boy, there was a shitload of Philly records. Man.
Yeah. You know, the Essex and so, you know, people like Brendan, the Tabulations, stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great soul and R&B town. I mean, the history is sensational here.
TSOP.
What was that?
TSOP.
Oh, yeah.
MFSB. The sound of Philadelphia.
Yeah, the Gamble and Huff building. They're trying to get that to be a historical site. It's still down there in Broad Street, but I don't know if anything's going to come out of it. But the recordings that were, I mean, you name it, they came in here to Sigma Sound to record. Lou Rawls, David Bowie, I mean, on and on and on it goes.
I know I remember with the stuff at DRC that, you know, they'd sit in there and my dad was always it's not a Hartford record. You know, there was knowing the market is so important, and he would know, you know, pretty much what was going to work in there, what wouldn't. But yeah, him and Jimmy would go around and around. It was, but yeah, I don't know how many people here would remember Phil Stebbin.
I remember Phil Stebbin.
Phil was our traffic.
Oh my God.
But I'll tell you,
just to know it all, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mr. Fix-It.
Yep. Fix-It. And then I remember back, you know, when I was a kid, he'd come over the house. He reminded me of Morty Amsterdam.
Nobody did a better double talk.
Nobody. Yeah.
Wow.
And he
should have been on stage.
He was actually my dad told me way back, probably back in the 50s, he'd go to Phil's house and they'd listen to hi-fi. Oh. Phil had a hi-fi. And they would listen to music and have a few cocktails. But yeah, it was something. My dad was actually with him as Phil took his last breath. And Phil was a great man. And he taught me, I mean, when I went to DRC, the only thing they insisted upon was that before they let me loose anywhere, that I work in all the different departments. And working with Phil, when they were doing everything log-wise by hand, gave you a whole new appreciation from when you were out on the road coming in with a last minute order.
At Friday, I just remember Bob Kurzman coming into the station on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock or 4:30, trying to get an order placed. And Phil Stebbin has the log literally falling over his desk onto the floor
Across all the
because
desks,
he's
yeah.
doing it by hand. And then someone would come in, the salesperson would walk over, excuse me, Phil, can I bother you? What do you want? Bob Kurzman's here, and he has to get a last minute weekend shopper special
Oh,
on,
yeah.
and it
36
starts
spots.
today at 3 o'clock. Are you crazy? We have rules. I'm not. And then eventually he would do it, but he would go kicking and screaming, and he'd have to redo the whole paper log. I mean, it was crazy.
Does anybody have a copy of? He used to do a featurette on the morning show where he was Mr. Know-It-All.
Mr. Fix-It.
Mr. Fix-It. Mr. Fix-It. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had copy.
I've got a couple of those because he was
I'd
a
love to hear
recurring
it.
character. When Don Wade was doing mornings in 66 and 67, that's where he started the Mr. Fix-It on a recurring basis. And then he came back with.
He did it on.
Pete
I think
Sullivan was doing mornings.
Yeah, I think he was on DiCarlo's show, wasn't he?
He might have been too. Yeah.
Funny stuff.
I got a couple of those on tape.
Oh, yeah, gotta send that out. I know when I connected with his niece or something a few years ago, and I sent her one of those, Ed, and it just made her day to be able to hear her Uncle Phil like that. It was great. But I tell you something, a guy that he never even saw him loosen his tie. He was always dressed to the nines. His sleeves would be halfway rolled up, and I spent about 6 weeks in there with him. And every now and then, in the middle of insanity, he'd look up at me and go, "You rotten kid," He's a great guy. But that, and I learned about AVOs, avoid verbal orders.
That was a Tom Pate. Thing.
Little piece of paper, that basically write down what you need and make
avoid verbal
orders of it. Yeah, he was good.
Hey, listen, speaking of records and the last breath taken, the passing of Roberta Flack this past week, it was a great loss. What always brought to mind to me was the song, the recording of The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. Not so much the fact that it was in Play Misty for me, but that had to be the softest record.
Oh, the front of the rumble on the turntable.
Everything imaginable. And you could hear one of the amusing things about that was on AM radio when that was played. You could hear the buildup of compression. The spaces that were there and the scratchiness. Every surface noise imaginable would come out with the compression. And the more compression you had, the more it came up, and it actually dominated for like almost 5 minutes. But that was probably the softest record that ever made it into top 40 radio.
And Bob, that was also the single was pretty long too, as I recall. And I wonder if that ever affected Charlie and Jim's decision making about is the record too long to put on the air?
520, but the song was actually around a few years before that.
Yeah.
And a guy named Joel Dorn, does anybody know the name Joel Dorn? He was a record producer for Atlantic. He was a Philly DJ. He was a jazz DJ and eventually went to work for Atlantic. He was responsible for signing her to Atlantic Records, as well as many other jazz people and R&B people. And he was probably one of the funniest guys I ever met. He was a Temple grad, and we did a few fun drives at RTI, and the guy was just hilarious. When he was on the air back in the early 60s, people would tell me he had total disregard for the weather on the radio. So every day he gave the same forecast. Made no difference whether it was July or January.
Was that WHAT?
He gave the same forecast.
Bob, was that WHAT?
It was HAT-FM.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
96.5.
Yeah.
Of course, at WABC, the temperature was always 77 degrees. You're
right.
Bob, you mentioned Roberta Flack. She lived in the Dakota, which is a very famous. My brother, and I met her a few times. My brother lives in that building, or has an apartment in that building. He lives in Florida most of the time, but he still has his apartment there. But she lived there for decades.
Yeah.
And she'd see her walking around, and the nicest, sweetest person you could, and very unassuming. Even though she was
That's
a
where
big
John
star.
Lennon was shot, right?
She was right down the hall. She lived right down the hall from John Lennon.
Yoko still has 4 apartments in that building, believe it or not.
Really?
I could only live in one.
I got to see her perform with Donny Hathaway at Carnegie Hall when I came back from Toledo. It was the first concert I went to, and she was there with Donny Hathaway, Where's Love, and that kind of thing. And they each did
Closer
a
I
set
Get to You.
individually. Yeah, they each did a set individually, and then did a couple of songs together towards the end. And as I was watching it on Donny Hathaway's band, I looked up on the backup group. Guy playing guitar was a guy that I went to high school with at Jamaica High School, who had been playing folk music in Greenwich Village, and I spent a lot of time with him down there when I ran into him. So I hung out outside trying to hook up with Gil Silva, and I never got to meet him because they went out the back and I was out the front. But it was a great concert, and the same kind of thing, same unassuming air on stage as she had everywhere else, as you point out, Ron. She was just a warm person.
Very much
Hey,
so.
hey, Bob, I've got a very obscure memory of this Roberta Flack, the song "Killing Me Softly" with her song.
Yeah.
My pre-radio job was at the Bloomfield Bicycle Shop.
Oh yeah,
my
that was
God. Mike
that was
Wolf.
Mike Wolf.
Yes,
Mike Wolf.
exactly. And he had a we had an exhibit at the Hartford Armory where they were doing home shows at the time. And that year we were set up across from the Mobile Studio D. And I remember the first time I ever heard the first lines of Roberta Flack song, which starts cold, was played from Mobile Studio D by Bob Craig. And I don't know why that's cemented in my head.
I don't know. I have no recall of that.
That is an
I don't even
obscure oldie.
Yeah, I don't even remember the remote that we did for that.
Yeah, my understanding is that when she did Feel Like Making Love, she did it in one take because she didn't like the lyrics because of her religious background. I read that years ago.
Yeah.
Hey,
All right,
question for people, not to change the subject. I ended up with this little artifact this week. I don't know if anyone will recognize it.
Oh, I used to have one of those.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We used to have one of those on my
Yeah,
desk for
CRN,
13
yeah.
years.
Well, I've
Yeah,
got one
nice.
sitting here that was handed to me this week. I thought you
Well,
might
tell us what it
recognize
is.
It's a clock
It's a
for
Connecticut
Connecticut Radio Network.
I'm sorry, what?
Connecticut Radio Network.
CRN,
clock.
Steve.
Oh wow, I couldn't see it. Okay, there we go.
I thought it was a
I had one of those on
weapon
my
with a
desk. I think I
timer.
still have it somewhere.
Well, like I said, it was handed to me this week. I kind of got a laugh out of it. My new paperweight.
That
It's
was
what it is.
that was a absolute oldie but goodie of ours. That goes back to
Yeah.
the 70s.
Wow. That would be an OBG. An
Yes.
OBG.
OBG.
All right, Clark Smith. Good morning to you, Clark.
Good morning. How are you? It's
Oh, you up north?
41 degrees in Hollis, Nashua, New Hampshire, and it's a quiet Friday.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Lee Gordon.
There again?
Lee Gordon.
Good morning. I am, despite the background, which is just there for Russ's benefit, I'm in sunny Florida where it's 70 degrees. And
Is that your home?
what's that? That was my home. That was my home for 2 years.
That was your
Going
prep
back to the
school.
home.
What are we looking at?
It's my
Jail.
Yeah, right.
It's my dormitory. Yesterday we had a Zoom for our school had fundraising, and this is the background that I had set up. And
Did you say dormitory or reformatory?
a little of both.
School for wayward boys. Yeah.
A little of both. Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us around to Ted Daliku. And the reason I did say Ted was because Ted had the idea of talking about a brush with greatness. You mentioned, I think, Roberta Flack, but Ted, I think you can kick us off. I mean, it was interesting. Everybody's met somebody along the way.
Well, that's what occurred to me just, I don't know, yesterday for some reason came across because we all talk about some of the records, some of the people and performers that we've spent time with. But when you have an interview or you meet somebody that leaves an impression on you, as a kid growing up, I was a real Roy Rogers fan. I mean, I had the cap guns, I had the hat, I watched the show every Saturday. And when later on in life, when I was dropping my kids off at their mother's house, and they were feeling sad and grumpy because they were very young, Patty and I taught them the words to Happy Trails to You. So that was kind of broke some of the ice, and we know we'd come back again. But then later on at TIC, when Roy Rogers was setting up his restaurant stuff, he was working for Marriott, came across, was doing a promotional tour for Marriott, stopped in the station. I got a chance to interview him. And we were in the big studio in the corner, and he was supposed to be there for about 10 or 15 minutes. we spent almost an hour because I literally knew everything about Roy Rogers and his background. And they tell you never meet your heroes, but he was the nicest guy and the most pleasant and best interview.
Ted, I got to ask you, did he take off his hat?
No, he never took off his hat.
Exactly.
He did not. That's right. I think he was bald. He didn't want to take his hat off.
Well, when I met him at TAE. He came into the studio, probably the same tour, and he was a great guy. I mean, he didn't break any of the bubbles that I had. I was like, all of a sudden, I was 8 again.
Yeah,
right. And
Right.
but he never took off his hat.
Well, he gave me a book and it's
Wow.
autographed to my kids, Chris and Alan, who Patty brought the boys in there. She was in the production, in the booth, not in the studio with us talking, but and the kids were watching it. And one of the best parts about it, when she was going down the elevator at the end of the interview, Roy Rogers and his promo guy were in the elevator. And on the way down from 19th floor, my son Alan started singing "Happy Trails to You." And then Chris, our youngest son, started singing with her, and Patty started singing, and they wound up singing with Roy Rogers in the elevator, "Happy Trails to You." And the door, Patty said the doors opened on the ground floor with all the people around, and there's Roy Rogers and our kids singing "Happy Trails to You."
My God.
That's fantastic.
That's
awesome.
lovely.
But it's nice when you meet somebody that you felt so strongly about for such, when you were a kid, and they really turn out to be nice people.
And where's Pat Brady now?
Where's what?
Where's Pat Brady now?
Yeah, right.
How about Nellie
I even
Bell?
I had the Nellie Bell.
yeah.
Yeah, I had Nellie Bell.
Mustard and custard.
Well, my dad was a big.
What was his Jeep? Wasn't his Jeep Nellie Bell?
My dad
Jeep was
loved
Nellie Bell.
rhymes.
Yep.
So when Roy Rogers came around with real good fast food, he'd go, "Real good fast food," because it just good and food just didn't rhyme. So he'd say,
Right.
"Real good fast food." But that was it. And
I'm surprised he never had
I was handling, I think, Roy Rogers back then for recruitment or something, and he was coming to the Newington store just to visit some of the employees, and I had the inside skinny on that. My brother-in-law Jack Morgan, again, a real fan of Roy Rogers since he was a little kid, was one of the only few people in the restaurant because there really wasn't something they invited the public to, and he was so like a little kid again to have his picture taken with Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
But I remember the same thing. Roy was what a nice guy.
I'm surprised they never had anything on the menu called a trigger burger.
Yes.
That's what we called them.
A bullet dog. That's
Bullet
it.
dog,
I was,
Bullet dog. That's it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was at ESPN when I first started at ESPN. A bunch of us guys, we went to the Roy Rogers in Southington, and the girl comes up to me and she starts looking at me. So what will you have? I said, can I have a trigger burger? She goes, we don't have that. I said, all right, then give me a bullet dog. And poor girl, I had her going, and I said, just give me a hamburger.
The rivalry in those days was Gene Autry and Roy Rogers.
Yeah.
Gene Autry, the singing cowboy.
Yeah.
So years, and as we all know, Gene Autry went on to have an incredible broadcasting career. He owned Golden West Broadcasters, and he was a fabulously wealthy guy. So we had a management meeting. Buckley, this is back in the late 70s. Buckley had a management meeting in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
And we had it at the Gene Autry Hotel. And I forgot the name of the hotel, but it was Gene Autry's hotel. And I'll never forget this. We're sitting there, it must have been 50 of us, and Gene Autry walks in the room. Everybody stopped. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And Rick gets up and walks over and, greets Gene Autry and introduces him to everybody. It was unbelievable. I said, "There's Gene Autry. I'm in the room with Gene Autry."
I shook hands with Gene Autry at the rodeo when I was a kid, leaning over the railing. I almost fell into the arena. My sister grabbed me from the back, and I was leaning over the railing, and Gene Autry was riding by on the outside, shaking hands with people. I managed to shake hands with him.
Remember what the name of his horse was?
Champion.
Champion. That's it.
Champion, right? Yeah, Champion.
I was a Hopalong Cassidy fan.
Oh, another William
Yeah,
Boyd.
you remember Hopalong Cassidy?
Sure did.
Yeah, William Boyd. Yeah.
And Gabby Hayes.
Gabby Hayes.
Bob Craig, I think Bob, you're losing a little light on you. Can you get maybe, I don't know if you need to back up or whatever it is there. Dave, what do you suggest?
Don't tell them.
Don't get me going.
Well, what about some of the other guys?
You need some front light, Bob.
How about some of the other interviews?
I could give you a couple of quick stories. As we were launching WPLR, I spent some time with John Lennon, and we did some interviews with him when he was. You mentioned the place down in New York,
The Dakota. That's
the
where they
Dakota.
lived.
That's where he was living. Yeah, it was. But this was back in 1972, and he was actually down in the Village on Bank Street. He and Yoko. That was where the photo was, where they were in bed. And I had set up an opportunity to get together with him to set up an interview that we had live on the air right after we had switched over to PLR. Jay Crawford did the interview. And so I called him up to get things going. And we're having just a normal conversation, but nobody told me that I was on the air with him. I just was setting up the phone call, and then I was going to turn it over to Jay, and then he was going to go on the air and have the interview. And I was starting to ask him about his concern about deportation and stuff like that. And I thought the better of it, but I never knew that it was on the air. But when we started PLR, we set up some promo interviews, and I worked with Tony Bennett, and I worked with Phil Silvers.
Oh, yeah.
This is how long ago?
Wow.
Sergeant Bilko.
Yes.
Sergeant
That's it.
Bilko.
Bilko.
I had lunch with Phil at the deli down in New York, in the Lower Manhattan. Whatchamacallit?
Katz's.
Katz's. We had the best time. I went up to Tony Bennett's apartment. He had a big white grand piano in his living room, and we had coffee and spent about an hour recording and just chatting. And Dick Cavett and what's his name from Canada? The singer. I hate the
Paul
fact
Anka.
Paul Anka, yes. So they all lived in New York, and it was really nice. And they all cut these promos for WPLR. But the longest involvement that I had with somebody was with Jerry Lewis when we brought him to the New Haven Green for 5 straight days, where he did his entire show that he was doing at the Oakdale Theater. And we raised $25,000 for muscular dystrophy, and then went on the telethon and presented the check to him. And the first host for the first day of that was some guy named Imus. He had just arrived from Cleveland and had never done a public appearance. And but the most fun I had was going to a luncheon where the Allman Brothers just happened to be playing in a restaurant for lunch. And I was a guest of WNEW, which was even more interesting because we were competing. But those were the times you just never forget.
Yeah.
But the
And
weirdest...
Dick, you also had Fleetwood Mac come by PLR too, didn't you?
Oh, I produced a full session with them at Trodnossel. And then I took them out to lunch. And we were in the restaurant up in Wallingford, and I said, this is a safe place. Nobody's going to know who you are. Let's just have a nice, quiet lunch. This was after the sound check and before we came back to do the recording. And it turned out I was wrong. Everybody came over to the table, but Stevie Nicks on fire. And she had just joined the group along with Lindsey Buckingham. And but the nicest of the group was what's her name?
Christine McVie.
Christine Perfect McVie was the nicest woman, nicest person you'd ever want to work with. And I worked directly with her basically on most of the staging for the whereas the other people were focusing on staying in tune and giving dirty looks at each other. She was in charge. And it was good. I have moments I'd never give up. I could talk forever, but I just felt so very lucky to be in the right place at the right time to work with these people. And we also worked with our share of assholes too. One of the nicest people I ever worked with for a number of times, Frank Zappa.
Really?
And you want to talk about somebody who is interesting.
I could play interesting, all right.
Well, I mentioned last week there was a song that we played on the air that nobody was allowed to play. I'll think of it in a minute. Dynamo Hum. Yep. And the lyrics were very very edgy, but the production, the music, the way that he constructed everything was just otherworldly. It was fantastic.
Steve, I have a story from WPOP back in the day.
Oh, good.
This was April 1st, 1973. It was the first day that Merv Griffin actually owned the radio station. And Bob Piva was program director at the time. And it was also April Fool's Day. It was on a Sunday. And he arranged for a lot of record stars to come in and take the place of the DJs on that day. And two of the guys that I remembered were Jim Croce and Harry Chapin. They both came in, and later, after it was all over, at the end of the day, we went to a place on the Berlin Turnpike called Fast Eddie's. Bob
yeah.
DeLisa owned a place called Fast Eddie's, and he had a nice place, and they had bumper pool tables. So my memory is that there I was playing bumper pool with Harry Chapin and Jim Croce.
Wow.
April 1st, 1973.
Wow.
When I was a kid, my mother had gotten tickets for myself and my two cousins to go down to New York to be on the Howdy Doody show.
Oh
And,
boy.
Yeah, so my first train ride into New York and going under the hotel and all that. And anyways, we got to New York, and actually that was the one thing that got me into this business, because I was just enthralled with what was going on. I think it was like maybe 7 or 8, not even 8. I think it was 7. And I was just watching how they were doing stuff, and I would walk away from the tour, and my mother would be going, "Where is he?" And I'd be going there. Anyways, we get into the studio, and the minute they open the door, all this color just hits you. Red balloon, blue balloon, yellow. I mean, bright colors. And I'm saying to myself, it's in black and white. Why are they doing colors? Well, one of the guys I used to work with at ESPN worked at NBC, and that was the show they were testing their color cameras on. And so, anyways, so we're all trying to put us where we're going to sit. And my cousin got to sit next to Buffalo Bob, and I'm fighting for the seat because I want to sit next to Buffalo Bob. And sitting there, and I went to go give her a kick in the shins, and I missed. I hit Buffalo Bob in the shins. And I just looked up, and he just looked at me, and he goes, "Now, little boy, we're going to put you up over here
in the peanut
And I go,
gallery."
No,
The
don't
peanut
cry.
gallery, right?
Yeah, in the peanut gallery.
Hey,
So-
Dave, what time is it?
It's Howdy Doody
Doody
time.
time.
Yeah.
Did you
So-
get to meet Princess Summer, Fall, Winter, Spring?
Yes.
I
Yeah,
had
when
a
she was
crush on
alive.
her.
Yeah, like a lot of us. And
Yeah.
so the years later, talking to Walt Dibble, and Walt Dibble saying, he says, I got to find somebody I can do an interview with Buffalo Bob Smith. He's over at the Sinesta. I'll do it. And he says, really? So yeah. So I go over to the Sinesta, and was this young girl from HCN there, and just the two of us. So we did the interview, and I said to Buffalo Bob, I says, anything you remember that was outstanding, and thing that happened there? Well, little boy peed his pants, and I said, did you ever get kicked by one of the kids? And he looked at me. Yes, he says, little boy was fighting with his sister, and I go, no, that was his cousin. And he goes, well, and they put there, and he looks at me and he goes, how do you know it was his cousin? And I just sat there and I smiled at him, and he looked at me and he goes, you? I go, yes. So he gave me a kick in the shins, tap in the shins, and he says, you know how many years I waited to do that? And he says, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. But that was my introduction to Buffalo Bob,
and he also went on to own radio stations, or at least he owned the one in Portland.
Yep. And I met a lot of people when I worked at Channel 5, WNEW in New York. And then, of course, at ESPN, you didn't know who you were going to run into there. I mean, I was walking down the hallway with a couple of guys, and this guy comes running down the hall. And he goes, can you tell me where PCR 4 is? And I says, absolutely, David. You go down the stairs, told him how to get there. He said, yeah. I said, by the way, I loved your music. Oh, thanks. Goes down, and the other two guys said to me, who the hell was that? I said, that was Davy Jones of the Monkees. You're kidding me. The only reason I recognized him, I saw him on the tube like a day before. But I mean, back then he had put on weight, and he looked a lot different. And so, but yeah, you never know. I'm swinging, doing air golf in the hallway, and this woman and her kids, she says, "Well, you got to come back on your swing a little bit more." And that, and I looked at her, and it was
Joan Joyce,
Annika
Lopez.
Sorensen.
Yeah, and it was well, her husband is Bobby was Knight in the studio from the Mets. Anyway, I looked back and I recognized her right away.
Oh, Nancy Lopez.
I says, "You know this game? You know a little bit about this game?" Yeah, I knew who she was. But yes, I mean, you never knew who you were going to meet.
Guys, I gotta bail out. I want to say goodbye. My other businesses are calling me, so.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Nice to see all of you. Talk
See
to
you.
you
See you, Tom.
directly. I got something to discuss with you, but later.
I grew up in
Good
the
luck.
city, and I was on the Howdy Doody show 5 times in the Peanut Gallery.
Whoa.
I was on twice.
Wow, you're a star.
Yeah,
I was on there
Captain
twice.
Jet co-pilot, and
You get
twice on Rudy
residuals?
Crispy, so I had no chance to avoid broadcasting.
Did they give you like a free Tootsie Roll pop or anything?
I got a little
Wonder
Wonder Bread from the Peanut Gallery a couple of times.
The little loaves of Wonder Bread they used to give away, right? The little tiny
Right,
ones?
right, yep.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You know
Yeah, we
why
get
the
cut.
Lone Rangers?
Blue balloons.
You know why the Lone Ranger's horse was called Silver?
Say again?
You know why the Lone Ranger's horse was called Silver?
Silver cup
No.
bread.
Correct.
Okay.
First sponsor, and
Bing, bing, bing,
who was the first Lone Ranger?
Wow.
Clayton Moore?
Grace Beamer.
Grace
Right,
Beamer
right.
was first. Yeah.
WXYZ in Detroit.
Yeah.
But I do have, I've got to run, but I want to share one of the weirdest lunches I ever had was we were running the interconnect for the cable systems in Connecticut. I think this was, Ron, you were coming over and we were doing business with the Giants, as I recall, and Dick Ferguson made a connection with me with the cable people, and we put together an interconnect. I don't know if you remember this.
I do.
I actually started off selling the internet with Lori Johnston.
Lori Johnston,
catching what you're
absolutely. She
saying.
came to work for us. She worked for us after she left the cable system in the Valley
I was
Cable.
United, I think.
And Dave Calabrese, who had worked for us at WPLR as well. Anyway, long story short, so we had CNN and ESPN on the network. We were paying CNN, paying ESPN, and CNN was paying us because they had just launched. So they decided to have a luncheon to pitch a reverse and get CNN to be paid for their audience, which was minuscule, while we were delivering all of these cable customers. And so it was going to be held at Gordie Howe's restaurant in Glastonbury, which goes back a long way with me because I grew up in Detroit and I grew up watching Gordie play. So I came there with all of the cable operators and I sat down at the table in front. They said, "This is the table reserved for you." And I figured it was the pitch directed to me because we were selling and they needed to get the revenue. And who sits down next to me but Gordie? Now I'm sitting and I'm having a conversation with my idol hockey player that I grew up with, Gordie Howe, in his restaurant. And I turn my head and who's sitting on my other side but Ted Turner? Now I'm sitting between Gordie Howe and Ted Turner, and I'm trying to figure out how on earth will these two people connect? And I decided the best way to find out is to not say much, toss out a toss up and see what happens. And they were so different. The personalities were so different and they connected, and we had the most fascinating conversation over about 2 hours. He got up and made his pitch and the whole thing, but it was like from two entirely different worlds. And it was really something. That was the strangest, I think, the conversation that I'd ever had was between those two, but I'll never forget that one.
One of the things about working, when I worked at CBS FM, is I took the 11:05 train from Grand Central to Stratford, and we had a group of regulars who would sit in the deadhead car up front where the engineer was. They literally wouldn't book any. They would lock that car up, and only a group of special people could be in there. And fortunately, I was one of them. Sandy Dennis the
yeah.
Academy
Yeah.
Award-winning actress,
Yeah.
was a member. There was a guy named Rex Everhart. You would probably recognize him because he was in the movie Seven Ups. Also he was also Benjamin Moore, or one of the paint companies. He did all the national commercials. He was one of the Maytag repairmen back in the
Oh, yeah.
day. The guy, he was on the train. Paul Peterson, the
Oh,
singer
yeah.
actor, he
Yep.
was one of the guys. And
Jesse White was the Maytag one.
pardon?
Yeah.
Was Jesse White the Maytag one that was there?
Jesse White was the famous Maytag one.
Okay.
But it was what was interesting is you kind of really realized that they were just people, you know. I mean, yeah, once you got over meeting them for the celebrity that they were, after a while, you know, it was like I remember reading lines. Sandy Dennis was going to do a made-for-TV movie, and I was reading the lines back to her on the train, and you know, and she was doing her dialogue. That's how she was memorizing her stuff. She was a really nice lady. Died very young,
Yeah.
54 years of age of I think it was ovarian cancer. She lived, I believe, in Westport, and you know, just a tragedy. She was a good actress. She loved cats. I think she had like more cats than most you know, kennels or whatever vets have. And she would always talk about her cats. And but we talk about Roy Rogers. I had John DeLorean come into my studio, and I talked to John DeLorean, you know, the guy, the famous automaker, you know, and he was a great guy. He was a great guy, but he had his issues, and we all probably know what his issues were. I had Drew, Leslie Burkus, and what's the other,
Anthony Newley.
Anthony Newley. Thank you very much. That's the guy I interviewed, not Burkus. I had Anthony Newley. Anthony Newley was great, and very talented. He was on one of my guests on one of my shows. I mean, the nice thing about the business that we're in is we do get access to some amazing people. I mean, I won't get into the groups that I met, you know, in rock and roll over the years, you know.
Yeah.
We all have had that. But there are some special people. And one of the benefits is that we got to meet these people, a lot of them. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, I know. And we had Lee Gordon. I mean, Merv Griffin was about as low key as you could possibly get.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, we got to meet him a couple of times, and he was, you know, he was a really down to earth kind of guy for a guy that had, you know, that could. He was the boss. He owned the place, and but he came across as a really just a nice guy. I remember Jerry Brooks did an interview with him on the air, and somewhere I must have a tape of that, but because I remember putting together a tape for Jerry's stag party, and using a clip or two from that interview on the tape. But we got to meet a bunch of people came through the station. I remember Colonel Sanders came in one time, and and then you know, we obviously you get to go backstage at a lot of concerts. Got to meet Ricky Nelson, and I remember I said some ridiculously stupid thing to him, but you know, hey, this is like meeting one of the kids from the neighborhood, and you know, Steve Miller came to the station, and there was you know, just a bunch of people that you wouldn't ordinarily get to
Steve
meet.
Miller, the Pompatus of Love.
The Pompatus of Love, and that was about that time that he came to the station.
Yeah,
when
we had Mike Holland was interviewing Alice Cooper, and Mike kept telling me Alice Cooper's coming in today. Okay, so I'm standing there. This is at night, and I'm engineering a show, and all of a sudden I hear the buzzer ringing. I look out, and there's this guy, you know, not, you know, stressed, and I recognized him right away. Went to the door, brought him in, and I says, "Here, have a seat." And all he talked about was golf. He was a huge golf.
Huge golf
and I
guy,
played golf.
right.
And we'd be talking. He said, "Where are courses around here you could play?" Of course, this is in the wintertime. And but he was as down to earth as you could be. And he goes into the studio with Mike. Mike would get to set the chair and all that. And he says, "How do you want me to be?" And you want me to be Alice Cooper? He says, Mike said, "Do what you feel is right." And so he went into his little character role as Alice Cooper and talking strange. He got out of the room and come down. He says, "Dave, can we play some golf sometime?" I says, "Hey, if you're in the area, let me know." I says, "I'll hook you up." And that never happened, but and then he gave us 2 tickets to see. It was Welcome to My Nightmare tour.
Yep.
And so Mike and I went to the show. Where he steps out in the middle of the screen, and then after the show, we went backstage. And well, these guys like to party a lot. But Alice Cooper was, different person.
Oh yeah.
And it was
When he
himself.
used to- when they first created Alice, it was interesting because Alice was all driven by alcohol. And he would, in the very beginning, that's where Alice came from, was a complete alter ego when Alice would turn into Alice. And my
Vince,
dad
Vince,
came.
Vince would turn into Alice, right?
I said one day, my dad came home. He says, "Yeah, I was on the phone with Alice Cooper today, telling Polish jokes." Alice had a great sense of humor. So when he was playing New Haven, my dad says, "You want to go backstage and meet Alice Cooper?" And I was really terrified because the guy used to chop babies' heads off and wrap boa constrictors around him, a regular guy. And we went backstage, and he had all these, his band, they were all dressed in drag, and they all had beautiful women sitting on their laps and all this stuff. And so at one point, manager comes in and says, "Got 10 minutes, Alice." And they said, he goes, "Now we got to separate the men from the boys." And he breaks open a bottle of hard liquor and starts drinking. And it was one of those great rock and roll moments. I was backstage, and Alice was standing there all by himself, and the band is playing, and he's getting ready to walk up, the stairs to go up on stage. And I went over to him. I said, "So, Alice, how you doing?" And he just makes this Alice Cooper face. He goes, "I'm great. This is like 1% Coca-Cola." And then he just walked in. And they said a guy named Gary Stromberg wrote a book about The Harder They Fall, about all these different people that have made it through addictions. And he said, and when they interviewed Alice, he said that was the most terrifying thing, was to perform as Alice when he had already, dropped alcohol and he was clean and sober. But nice guy. Loved golf. I remember that. From that night.
Dave, talk about warming up with booze before you go on. I got to meet Arthur Fiedler, the Boston Pops.
Oh, wow.
TIC was sponsoring a concert, and Patty and I went backstage to meet him in the dressing room. And Arthur Fiedler is sitting there, this little old guy with his tuxedo on, and he's got a bottle of wild turkey sitting on the stage and a glass, a tumbler filled this high with wild turkey. And he's sitting there drinking the wild turkey while we're talking to him. And he's doing, "Okay, yeah, fine. A couple of nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah." And then it's time for him to go on with the Boston Pops. They're playing the opening stuff. And the guy walks him up to the stage. We're watching this from backstage. And he points Arthur Fiedler towards the podium and gives him a push. And he just stumbles across to the podium.
So Ted, when he was waving his arms around, he didn't know what the hell he was doing.
No idea what's going on. Right? Absolutely not. The orchestra is the one that went. I mean, he's just doing this, and then every now and then he'd turn around, then turn back again, and do this more. But to the stage.
Dave, you had mentioned about Alice Cooper being in the studio with Mike. I don't have a recollection of there being another microphone in the studio. Was there?
No, they had to share it.
No.
I mean, I could have hooked them up with another one, but they just shared the mic.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I never recall another microphone in that studio.
One mic.
Yeah, they only had the one mic in there.
But Alice did get his own box of AP paper to sit on, Bob.
Oh, well, it was an honor to sit on the same AP box that Alice Cooper sat on.
Well, that was pretty tight in there anyway. He must have been sitting on Mike Collins' lap. I know Mike was skinny, but give me a break.
Well, it was. You had a lot of room in the back. I mean, that's where you had all the records stored and that.
Yeah, you moved back where
being a
DRC for all those years, all you guys know that there was so many people coming and going. When Brad Davis was doing the morning show, he always had people coming in because Brad had a close connection with the Bushnell. and the Hartford stage, and a lot of these guys would be doing shows. So I remember one day Robert Goulet came to the station, and he's sitting in the conference room. I'll never forget this. This is weird. And he's sitting in the conference room, and I forget who it was. Came over to me, and says, Robert Goulet's in the and the doors closed. Robert Goulet's in there waiting. He's going to do an interview with Brad. I said, wow, Robert Goulet. I'd go in and introduce myself and just say, hey, I'm a big fan. Great to see you. Now, this is at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30 in the morning. Walked in. The guy was in full makeup. It was like he was ready to go on like TV. I said, does anybody tell him it's a radio show? It's not television.
It probably wasn't his only interview that day.
I was so strange to see that. The guy had full makeup on. I said, well, this
Well,
is
he's
weird.
probably going to go over to 3 or 8
Probably,
30
yeah,
or
I
something
suppose,
like that.
but
We had
still.
Uncle Milty up here for something for the 50th anniversary of Jewish Federation. They brought in Milton Berle.
Oh wow!
And I'm telling you, he's dawdling around like a little old man. He's bald on the top. They brought him out to stage. He had this thing. It looked like the kind of powder puff things, except a toupee. And all of a sudden, he's dancing around the stage. This guy could barely walk until they took to put the spotlight on. It's like they stuck the cattle prod in his butt.
Yep.
Yeah, he had to prove he was relevant. It was amazing.
Steve, I remember when I was doing middays at Big D, your dad or somebody hooked me up with doing a fashion show with a group from New York. They were from soap operas. So I was the groom, and they had me dressed up as a groom, and this 23-year-old actress in the soaps was my bride, and the pictures were in the Hartford Courant, and we were interviewed and all of that. It wasn't years later, I was looking at these newspaper clippings, and I was holding hands with this 23-year-old actress, and that was turned out to be Meg Ryan.
I gotta ask you guys, when you guys were in 1970, when I went to DRC, was the Cinerama Theater? I'm trying to remember. This is going way back.
Is that the one? Is that the one?
Farmington Avenue.
Okay.
With the round screen.
We did a promotion there for Fiddler on the Roof, the movie, and the cast was there, or some of the cast was there. I forgot who they are, but that was one of the first major promotions I remember when I was at DRC, and it was like, it had to be like March or April of 1970. Do any of you guys remember that? Were you there, Bob, for that?
I may have been. That's when I got to DRC, was in March of 1970, but I don't remember going to that. Maybe because I was too new. I was just getting settling in. But did you come after me?
I think we came almost at the same time. I think I came like in March, maybe within a week of each other.
Probably that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that Cinerama was a very unique theater. That had that, was it like a concave screen? And that's where we saw the, I think, Fantasia when that first came out, and also Woodstock. When Woodstock was first premiered, it was over there. And that was really something to see it that way.
Well, you know, Harry Chapin was mentioned earlier. And I have to tell you, you talk about one of the nicest people.
Oh.
I don't know how familiar you are with the New Haven Road Race. I know that Ron has run it.
I only ran it 14 times, Dick.
Yeah. Wow. And we started that. That was a WPLR promotion. That's how it started. I had sold it to the town. They didn't believe that us druggies could pull something like that off, but we did. And so the first year we had Bill Rogers come and run it, put it right on the map. Wow, and within 2 years, it was the national 20-kilometer championship, and it's run to this day. But anyway, sure is. So in 78 or 79, I asked Jimmy to get me somebody for Woolsey Hall, just as an entertainment thing for the night before, for the warm up, where everybody comes and they carb up, you know, the day before the race and all that stuff. So we had Harry Chapin coming in, and we also had Blood, Sweat, and Tears, who had broken up and they were just coming back together. And this was going to be their first public performance back together. So they were out and they were performing, and I was wondering where Harry was, because I was emceeing the thing from the stage, and I was figuring out how am I going to fill time if Harry doesn't show. And he walks in and he's all kind of semi-disheveled, but he pulls himself together. And I said, what happened, Harry? He said, oh, my car broke down somewhere between Greenwich and Stamford, and I couldn't get it to start, so I had to hitchhike my way to get in here. Now, that is somebody That is, you know how easy it would be to say, sorry,
Nope.
shit happens, can't
Right.
be, see you later.
Yeah, I remember when Harry called the house one time, and my dad and him, of course, connected through the food bank and World Hunger and all that.
Yep.
And they hit it off right away. And Harry asked my dad what he was doing that week. And as soon as I going out to the Farmington Polo Grounds, there's a crafts fair. Harry goes, "You want me to stop by?" So my dad goes, "Oh yeah, sure." Pulls up in a Ford Granada at the Farmington Polo Grounds. Jumps out, pops open his trunk, grabs his guitar, jumps up on the stage, and says, "Hi, everybody. I'm Harry Chapin."
Wow.
We had Harry at University of Bridgeport twice, and some friends of mine drove him back to Long Island afterwards. I remember he was promoting World Hunger Year,
Yeah.
and he came off the stage after the show, and he stood there. There were probably about 40, 50 people standing there waiting for his autograph, and he stood there talking to people for 2.5 hours after the show. Nice.
That's what he did. He would stand there, and I remember at the High Life Ron Tom when he was there, and he said, "All right," he says, "I'm going to be around. So after the show's over, anybody wants to come down, I shake hands with the guys, kiss the girls. I don't kiss the guys, but." And that line went forever, and he stood there, and he was the last one to leave the auditorium. He goes, "Is that it? All right, everybody." And that was after everybody got a chance to meet him.
Yeah, he was there, and his brother Tom opened up for. I'm trying to remember who he opened up for after Harry passed, but he was also very nice. Tom Chapin. He was doing that. I forgot the TV show for kids. He was doing that Make a Wish, or I can hear the theme in my head. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, the family still performs every year. They do a concert. But I met Tom. Tom was playing in Collinsville at the Bridges or a bar or something up there. And I went up and I interviewed him on the air, and then I went up and he was sitting there in the kitchen tuning his guitar. Could have been nicer. Walked in and just talked a little bit about my dad and Harry, and Tom stayed away.
He had
for a little river band.
He had an affinity for radio. He remember when he did WOLD back in 1973, and I mean the guy he had a feeling for radio, and I think if I remember correctly, boy, am I reaching back? He would customize it every so often. He'd do a customized version for stations. I am the morning DJ at WMEX or whatever it was,
Yeah,
and,
the live album has him singing it for 93 KHJJJJJ.
Yeah,
he did that at the
I remember
Hartford.
when he in Hartford, he called up a bunch of people on the stage to do All My Life's a Circle, and my dad was one of them.
He came into DRC one time, and I was outside, and some kids broke into my car, and they took my FM converter out of my car, and Harry saw them, and so, but he walked, he didn't think anything of it, and because it wasn't going on anyways. Make a long story short, we were talking, and he was playing at the Springfield Civic Center because the Hartford Civic Center had roof collapsed. So we went there. So I went out with this girl. First time, first date. And so she comes up to my apartment and says, "We're going to go see Harry Chapin." I said, "Really?" I go, "Yeah." So we're like sitting near the front, and Harry's going on just before he goes into WOLD. And he goes, "Oh, by the way, whoever stole Dave's air converter better bring it back." And, he mentioned me by name. And he looks at me and she goes, and I, want to impress a girl like that? That's unbelievable. So after we go backstage, he says, "Let's go back." And so I go back and Harry's there and he goes, "Hey, Dave, how you doing? This is so-and-so." And she just sat there, was amazed. She finally said to me, she said, "This is the first impressive date I ever been on." She says,
I know
this
Harry
happen
was,
all the time? He was in the studio with me at TIC. We did an interview at TIC before he was going to do a concert at the Civic Center, Harvard Civic Center. And he got, as Dick mentioned, he will get to someplace if he has to, just to be there. And he had gotten through without having anything to eat all day. So about 20 minutes into the interview, he was in the studio for about an hour and a quarter. And he said, "You guys got any food around here?" And we looked and said, "Well, we don't keep any in the station." And he said, "But," so I called back to Jay. I said, "Jay, Harry wants some food. Do you have anything?" So they went out and they got a bucket of fried chicken from KFC, and we're sitting in the studio, and he was eating a bucket of fried chicken while we're doing a radio show and interview.
I remember when he played the Springfield Civic Center, and I just started at DRC. My dad just walked up to me and he said, "Can you go to the Springfield Civic Center and introduce Harry Chapin?" And I mean, I was 24, and I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? There's no way I'm getting up there." As much as I have my ham, but I did not want to do that. And he goes, "Well, Stephen, there'll be nobody there that night to represent the radio station, but I guess that's really not your problem." And I'm like, "Okay." And I went there, and it was amazing because my dad said, "You will not believe the feeling of power when you're up there."
Yeah.
And I went backstage, and I asked for Harry and Big John, who sang the high parts in WOLD and the low parts. I mean, the high parts in Taxi. And the low parts in OLD. I said, "Is Harry here?" He says, "No, he's in a conference right now." And you hear the toilet flush. He goes, "He's all set." And he came out, and I introduced myself, and Harry goes, "All right, see you up on stage." I had to go out to check with the soundboard, which microphone and stuff. And I went up there, and this was when Taxi 2 had come out. And so my dad gave me a few lines, and I went out and checked with the sound man, got up on the stage, and those lights went out. And all I said was, "How's everybody doing tonight?" That place went crazy. So, of course, I thought I was the star. And it was just like, I said, "Here's a man who came into our lives in a taxi. He's back with another one. Ladies and gentlemen, Harry Chapin." Harry comes out, two of us in the spotlight, shaking my hand. I thought for sure. And then, of course, I'm gone. But it was that feeling of power because you realize the concert's starting. They don't care who you are.
I remember that. I remember that night, Steve. That was when I brought what's her name, my first date to the show, and I remember you walking out.
The concert that he did when TIC sponsored it, one of the songs was 10,000 Pounds of Bananas, right?
Oh yeah.
And a big song. Well, the rest of the band just leaves the stage, and this Hartford Civic Center loaded in the dark with just Harry Chapin in the spotlight in the front. And he starts singing 10,000 Pounds of Bananas. And the audience is singing back to him every chorus at 10,000 Pounds of Bananas. So you hear these 16, 20,000 people shouting the same thing and all the cigarette lighters lighting up at the time, So that was the only light in the place. And he just captivated everyone as a solo sitting on a chair playing an acoustic guitar with a couple of microphones.
That's when shows were great and affordable.
Yeah. They say about people who are really, really big in entertainment that it seems like the bigger they are, they're the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. You may have a lot of trepidation about interviewing them and saying, "Gee, I hope I say the right thing," or whatever. We had a place here in the Philly area called the Valley Forge Music Fair. It was a lot like Oakdale, but this was indoors, and they would bring everybody in there. Everybody. There wasn't a bad seat in the house. And I got to MC a number of shows. They were pretty much all jazz people that I would do. I was doing a smooth jazz show for a while at WMGK, and they would bring in, well, I remember one time Dizzy Gillespie came in.
Oh,
I figured you would enjoy this, Ted. And Dizzy, when you would not interview, but when you would MC a lot of these shows, a lot of times the managers would get in the way and they would say, if you don't MC the show, you got 2 minutes, plug the new album and get off the stage and blah, 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 blah. So he came into the reception area with his manager, and he started walking back to his dressing room, and his manager came over to me and said, "You want to see in the show?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "How would you like to talk with Dizzy now?" Are you kidding? Dizzy Gillespie here is a giant. Came back, went back, and there he was polishing up that famous trumpet of his and chatting for about 10 or 15 minutes about everything. I wanted to know about his days with Miles, like in the late 40s when they were playing this great bebop stuff. And one time, it was Miles Davis that came in there. Miles was kind of like, a Sinatra, had the awe about him. You don't mess with Miles. There's some people you just do not mess with. So I'm in the reception area with my wife, and there's about maybe 6 other people. And we're chatting and having finger foods and all this. And all of a sudden, the back door opens, and in he walks. This is late 1980s. In he walks. The place is totally hushed. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. Miles has his trumpet in hand. He walks over to the people. He says, "How y'all doing? All right, good. Enjoy the show." And he walked back to his dressing room, and that was it. Got off the stage, introduced them, comes out, does his thing, and that was it. Never had a chance to talk to him, but it was about two other times I got to do a show, with him. But most of these people that I got to MC were pretty big names in jazz. George Benson was another. I interviewed Benson, I interviewed Stan Getz. Getz was as nice as could be, although he had this reputation of being
really.
kind of a tough guy to deal with. But he was superb in the interview and on stage. And Benson, George Benson, I did about a half hour with him.
He was from Pittsburgh, right, Bob?
That's right. Yes, absolutely. And again, another thing with a manager, we went backstage after the show, after he played, and his manager said, the MC, take about 30 seconds with Benson. Benson's in the back sitting around, come on in here. You're the guy that introduced me. Come on, sit down, have a beer, and just really as loose as you could get. But sometimes you underestimate these people and think, they're so godly that you get driven, and they're just so, like you said, Jim, down to earth.
Was he self-taught, Benson? Did he teach himself how to play?
He probably did, because he was pretty much got his start in the Pittsburgh lounge area playing guitar with what was his name, Jack McDuff, and those people, jazz organ players.
Brother Jack.
I mean, and then he hit pay dirt with this Masquerade, which was just such an enormous hit, and all the other hits that followed.
Well, I tell you, I mean, nothing is as impressive as having the opportunity to interview all of you guys. So I always think the amount of talent in here and the stuff that we've met the people that we've met along the way, and everybody's got some great backgrounds, and I really I enjoy when you take this from these experiences, and they're all priceless experiences. We're gonna have to wrap things up because Dave starts twitching when I go a little bit. As you know,
watch out he doesn't kick you in the shins.
Yeah. Well, the behind the scenes show is always a lot of fun too. So if you guys want to hang a little bit once we stop recording, that's fine. I also want to remind everybody about the Broadcasters Foundation of America, because obviously they're there to help us out. Anybody in the industry that's going through some tough times, or if you know anybody, financially, emotionally, whatever, you can always reach out to one of your broadcast brothers or sisters through the Broadcasters Foundation of America. And if you get a few extra bucks and you got something you want to, toss their way, that's always appreciated too. Nice turnout today. And Ted, excellent suggestion. And I think you can never get enough of that stuff. Everybody loves to live vicariously through that, and especially when it's a good experience, because we could do a whole show about the ones we met that we really had never met before. But
embarrassing moments is another show.
But I want to thank everybody: Pete Salamp, Bob Craig, Greg Simonson, Ed Bruder, Tracy Carmen, Ron Pell, Ted Dalicu, Russ Oasis, Judge Harrigan, Bob Marks, we got John Landry, Tom Marvin. Let's see, we've got Jim Harrington, Dave Nagel, Dave Overson, Dick Call, Clark Smith, Lee Gordon, and anybody else? I'm Steve Parker. All right. Did I get everybody? Cool. Yep. Cool.
Hey,
all
Greg, I didn't even see you there. Hi, Greg. Sorry about that.
Old neighbors. All right.
Hey, Dick. See you next week.
So we'll catch you on the next edition of Radio Friends again, and that'll be next Friday. And okay, let's see, what is that next Friday? It's going to be is that the 6th? Is that the right?
March 7th, right?
7th.
Yeah.
Yep.
7th.
So we'll look for you then, and catch you next time. Thanks a lot, guys. Always
see you next week.
Always
Bye.
a lot of fun.
Blue skies and green lights, everybody.
Your friends, radio friends again. Radio friends again.